I am now 29 years old. If I could go back to talk to my 23-year-old self who just discovered arm wrestling, to give him advice on how to get better and stronger way faster, here is what I would say. Number 1, use a real table. The first time I got on a real arm wrestling table, I was moving really awkwardly, with my hips away from the table, squatting down when going for pins. This is because for the first year we were pulling on box jump boxes, which prevent you from getting close because you can't put your feet under them. I had to then relearn almost from scratch how to arm wrestle. So preferably do your training on a real arm wrestling table from the start. Number 2, get a pulley. I didn't have an arm wrestling table at home for the first few years. So I had to find workarounds, like using benches in the gym or doing the exercises awkwardly in the air. When I invested in my own table and pulley system, I started making way better progress. It just provides way more accurate training, and it will be way easier to stay consistent if you can do your arm wrestling specifics from home. Number 3, build your handles. I didn't have enough money when I first started out to buy all of the expensive handles, and some of them, in my opinion, are definitely needed to get a good workout in that converts to arm wrestling strength on the table. But what you can do instead is you go to a local hardware shop, you buy a hard PVC pipe or a piece of cylindrical wood, you buy some screws and some straps, and you build your own multi-spinners and wrist wrenches for basically no money. It's an easy way to save some cash, and they will work just as well. Number 4, collect your weights. Weights especially were really hard to get and quite expensive when the world was on lockdown. So instead of waiting or saving money, I went outside with some extra strength shopping bags and I collected around 50 kilograms of rocks and brought them home. Then I weighed them on a scale. I made a 20 kilogram bag, a 10 kilogram bag, a 5 kilogram bag, and so on. And it worked great. The only problem was my cat wouldn't stop pissing on them. Number 5, condition your joints. When I found this sport, I wanted to get strong right away. I couldn't wait. So I used way too much weight on a wrist curl with a fat grip, and I tore my TFCC. I couldn't train for a year on that arm. So for your own good, start off light and properly condition your poor wrist ligaments before tearing them apart by going heavy on these lifts. Number 6, use proper handles. I thought the bigger the handle, the stronger it would make my fingers and my wrist. So I bought the biggest fat grips online that I could find, and I built a way too huge multi-spinner. They weren't effective and the movements didn't really feel like arm wrestling. When I bought smaller ones, I could finally tell what these exercises were actually supposed to work. So choose your handles according to your hand size. Number 7, hand and rotation strength. I used to focus on the flashy arm wrestling lifts, like hook curls with 50 kilograms or more. The entire gym was watching, and I'm still not sure if they thought it's impressive or just ridiculous looking. But then I still lost to non-arm wrestlers, which crushed my ego, but it made me realize that hand strength and rotation strength are much more important than anything else. So put the main focus on them from the beginning. It's just like deadlifting. Even with the strongest back and the strongest legs in the world, your grip will still determine how much you can lift. Number 8, don't overtrain. When I started arm wrestling training, I would sometimes sit in a corner in the gym, drenched in sweat because I was in so much pain, not knowing what to do. Only a few years in already, I properly figured out that this is counterproductive and that it doesn't mean that I'm going to progress faster because I'm training harder than everybody else. If you are hurting like this, you're just simply doing too much. Reduce volume, intensity and/or frequency from your training program until your body can handle it. Number 9, lift more, practice less. After learning how to arm wrestle somewhat well, I still put in most of my energy into table time. Me and my training partners used to destroy each other for like 4 hours or sometimes more every single week. Then I would spend the rest of the week trying to recover from that, only to then do it again. So in reality, I probably didn't even get much stronger during that time. Only when I started to treat table time as a light training meant to improve or at least maintain my arm wrestling technique, and I shifted the focus onto my lifts, is when I started to make real progress. After your initial learning period, progressing your weights on your arm wrestling specific exercises is way more important than table practice. Number 10, practice with control. We used to treat table time as a strength update every single week, going 100% with the intention to pin our opponent, sometimes even against the new guys. This leads to the practice session being unproductive and maybe even destructive from a training standpoint if you do this every single time. What you should be doing is to not go all out and to fight for center control against your opponent. When somebody has a very dominant position, ease up a little bit and then you can go again. Ripping arms open by pinning shouldn't really happen regularly. Number 11, don't copy the pros. My sentiment was always that Devin Larratt knows the most about the sport, so I'm going to copy his training program. I tried it out, but I couldn't recover from it at all. It was just way too much frequency for myself. When I created a program still based on his lifts, but adapted to my own body's abilities, it worked incredibly well. So learn from the pros, keep some things, but don't copy them exactly. Number 12, don't squeeze handles. Back in the day, I didn't wrap my multispinners around my wrist, I just squeezed them in my hand. The problem was, no matter how much I increased my maxes on these lifts that I did, it never really transferred to the arm wrestling table. It just isn't the most accurate training, it teaches you bad form, as you never want to squeeze your opponent's hand while in an arm wrestling match. So training this way should not be your priority. Number 13, stick to a plan. I used to change my training approach every few weeks. This led to me not making progress, stalling on my numbers and losing to the same people over and over again. So either invest a lot of time into figuring out the right routine for yourself, or you can get a coach to help you out and then stick to that for a long time. That's how you make actual, substantial progress. The info is out there. But if you want to work with me personally, you can write me a message to the email in the description. Number 14, go for experience. I went into my first tournament in Hungary with so much confidence. I knew nothing about arm wrestling, but I was somewhat strong in the gym and I could beat all of my friends. I didn't even want to pull newcomers. I only registered for the pro class right away, even though the organizers told me that that was probably a bad idea. Of course, I didn't listen to them. I beat my first opponent and I thought, wow, this is going to be really easy, just like I thought. And then I lost the next 4 matches and I was out. I almost broke up with my girlfriend that night and I was depressed for weeks. I had to adjust my expectations, I trained really hard, and then I won the newcomer class at my next tournament. So you might be the strongest in your friend group, but that doesn't mean you won't go 0-2 at your first actual arm wrestling tournament. So go there for the experience and not for the win. Number 15, hide your move. Once at a tournament, I telegraphed super hard that I was going to hook by coming forward with my shoulder, supinating and wrist curling really hard. My opponent simply filled out my hand with a low hand top roll and flash pinned me. And his very next start, he got flash pinned by a quick press. So don't make your move obvious by loading into that exact direction, because counters do exist in arm wrestling. Number 16, don't feed egos. In practice, you will encounter guys who are way stronger than you, but still just want to flash pin you for a quick ego boost. I used to just allow this to be a good sport or something like that, but these people have an ego problem and you're just feeding it by letting that happen to yourself. And the only thing that you're really getting out of this deal is unnecessary damage to your arm. So don't keep practicing with guys who are just flash pinning you, even when you told them not to. Nobody wins. Number 17, don't stay a novice. I've seen some people collect newbie class wins for years and years. When these guys finally make the switch to pro class, they will lack the experience that they could have gotten by pulling against good arm wrestlers. If you ever place first in a newcomer class, it should be your last time competing in one. You're wasting your time for a fake little ego push and you're taking the spots of actual newcomers, which might discourage them. Number 18, you don't know everything. I often felt like I had arm wrestling figured out. I know all of the moves, I know how to counter them and so on. All I need to do is to get stronger, right? Then I found out how little I actually know against top international pullers at big tournaments, getting outplayed before the go due to a lack of experience. There is still so much to learn which you might not even be aware of right now. Not only do you have to get stronger, you need to get more experience by competing preferably at above national level tournaments. Number 19, cut weight. In 2022, I won the minus 100 kilogram category at the state championship, but I still lost to Manuel Lengfeldner, who had 85 kilograms at the time, in the overalls. The point is, I came in the next year 85 kilograms myself, faced him again and won this time. Even though I weighed more than 10 kilograms less, I was still way stronger than the previous year. Arm wrestling is not like bench pressing. You can even gain strength while you're losing your excess body fat in the right situation. And you will be more competitive and you will probably look better in your real weight class. Number 20, don't fear arm breaks. Don't let your fear of arm breaks hold you back from your arm wrestling goals. It was on my mind a lot when I first started out, just because they are really scary looking and sounding. But I've only ever seen one arm break after all of these years of table practice, tournaments, public arm wrestling. Imagine what I could have seen in a different sport over 6 years. Breaking your arm can happen in a visually very good position also. That's because it's more about the way you apply pressure. You can internally rotate and twist your humerus bone in a perfectly square center position as well. If you know the basics and if you know how to pull, the chances become extremely low. And if you've been conditioned to arm wrestling after years of training, you can even pull in really disgusting positions and it's going to be hard to break yourself. Number 21, mythical creatures fall. After my first couple national championships, I felt depressed. I thought the currently strongest people in the country are mythical creatures, just born superior to me, and I will never have a chance. I was never going to reach them, my training was all in vain. But then I started reaching them. I started beating some of them. And just like that, the illusion fell. Don't lose hope, just stay consistent. You might end up somewhere you didn't think you could ever get to. Number 22, no progress. I had a false belief that getting beaten by an opponent quickly meant that there had to be a huge strength difference between you. But what I found out was the difference between getting flash pinned and flash pinning your opponent might just be a couple of kilograms on one of the important lifts. If you're 5% weaker, you will get flashed. If you're 30% weaker, you will also get flashed. So losing to the same opponent in the same way again doesn't mean you're not making progress. If you stay consistent, you might just beat him in a couple of months. Number 23, girl hands. People used to tell me that I had girl hands because they were quite thin and easy to grip. I thought that they would always be a weak point because of it, and I got a little bit discouraged. After a few years of the right training, they actually became a strong point. And them not being too scary in the setup might sometimes even be an advantage because of the surprise factor. The genetic size of your hands doesn't always determine the genetic strength potential of your hands. So don't make excuses, train hard and find out how good you can get. Number 24, prevent elbow pain. The inner part of my elbow often gave me problems. And so did the ulnar side of my wrist. These areas just never seemed 100% healthy. At some point this became too big of a problem and it made some certain exercises too hard to perform. So I started doing this exercise which combines wrist extension and finger extension every single day. Doing this religiously solved both of these problems for me. Number 25, train wrist extensions. My riser was never really a weak point for me. But after starting to train wrist extensions with heavy weights, I noticed I made some big jumps in my riser lift. That's because the rising motion happens by flexing both your wrist extensor and your wrist flexor, so train your wrist extensions just as seriously. Number 26, don't cheat pronation. My first pronation exercise was the pronation curls, where you're combining pronating and bicep curling with a belt. If you aren't extremely careful with the weight progression and your ego, you might compensate a lot of your pronating with your bicep, which I did and it showed. My top roll was basically non-existent for my first couple of years. Never cheat on your pronation work with your arm, the big numbers aren't worth it. 27. Lock your pronator. I used to cup and let my pronation open a bit when I did Devin Larratt's pronation lift. Even though I got somewhat good numbers in comparison to my training partners on this lift, they still used to laugh at my top roll. When I started training it properly though, with a kickback wrist and a locked pronation, the difference was astonishing. Do the lift properly, again, drop the ego and drop the numbers. If you don't, this exercise just becomes a back pressure exercise instead. Number 28, don't get dumped. The same thing goes for the riser lift, of course. I used to always compare myself to the pros and then went and chased big numbers. So I lifted the weight awkwardly with a dumped riser, disregarding my form. In arm wrestling, your worst enemy is your own ego. You will pay for not having it under control by being weak at the table. Number 29, bicep strength. I often lost matches when my opponent was able to isolate my biceps. This made me think, naturally, that I needed stronger biceps. But there are lots of people who curl more than me, which I can rip through easily in a hook. If you ever think that your biceps is your weak point, probably it's just going to be your rotation and your ulnar deviation. If you often get into this position and then you lose from there, it's a sign to train to not end up there. And funnily enough, even if you end up on your biceps, the thing that is keeping you from getting pinned the most is still the little bit of pronation that you have left. Number 30, pronate under the wrist. Training full range pronation with the belt through my hand made my wrist always hurt at the ulnar portion of it. I used to think that training like this would make my hand somehow more connected and stronger, but that just wasn't the case. And when I stopped wrapping the belt that way and I put at least one point of contact under my wrist, the pain went away and your pronator muscle will get the same exact stimulation. Number 31, full range wrist curls. Thinking that full range wrist curls shouldn't be done because you never want to be in the negative position as an arm wrestler was one of my many mistakes. I always had some wrist problems, they never felt 100% healthy, but when I stopped avoiding this variation of the exercise, it definitely helped. It has great wrist health and wrist flexor hypertrophy benefits. Start off light, work your way up and get really strong at these. Just use a small handle for this, as it otherwise could get dangerous. Number 32, specific wrist strength. As you may have noticed, if somebody has a strong wrist curl in the gym, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will also have a strong wrist on the arm wrestling table. One of the reasons for this is that in arm wrestling, you're always combining your wrist flexion with either a radial deviation or rising or an ulnar deviation or sinking. Which is why, in my opinion, most of your heavy work should be done with a one attachment handle, better known as a multi-spinner. Number 33, rising belt placement. For me, training riser never really felt quite 100% right. Something always seemed a bit off, and after performing the exercise, my wrist used to hurt a little bit. But after I played around with all of the different variations of belt placement, I found something that really works for me. So this rep doesn't irritate my wrist at all, and it is still the riser that will give out first on the exercise. You can also go a bit heavier like this, which is great because your back pressure gets some extra work. And this feels very accurate to what you would be feeling in a top roll battle on an arm wrestling table, so I can only recommend it. Number 34, match the shoulder. When an inside pulling opponent used to carve in with their shoulder and supinate in the setup, and I wanted to go for a top roll, I always just stood there with square shoulders and an awkwardly cupped in wrist. I didn't know how to respond to that. But then I learned that I could just carve in with them, get a great hand position and let the referee turn us out again. And this will give you an amazing position for your top roll. So even as an outside puller, you very rarely want your opponent to beat your shoulder line. Number 35, higher setup trick. Sometimes in the setup it feels like you can't get quite enough height for your posting top roll without covering your opponent's thumb knuckle. After I found out about this trick, this became less of an issue. Try opening your index finger like Presink does here, while still having your opponent's knuckle being visible. Number 36. track hammer curls properly. I always switched around my hammer curl exercises because none of them were accurate enough. With dumbbells, for example, you can lift up to maybe 10 kilograms more per hand if you just adjust your form a little bit and cheat a bit more with your back. So tracking becomes very inaccurate. Then I tried out strict curls against a wall, of course, with a hammer grip bar. And this is, in my opinion, the best exercise because you can track your numbers properly and you actually will know when you make progress. Number 37, develop multiple moves. Over the years, I've met a few weird athletes who are, for example, untop rollable. So if you're going in with the plan to top roll in the setup, you've already lost. If your name is not Levan, or Devon, or maybe Hermes. But if you had a hook or a press, you would actually have a decent chance of winning. So training to be a well-rounded puller who has at least one other option will make things a lot easier. And of course, it will also be harder for your opponent to counter you. Number 38, learn basic counters. Knowing basic arm wrestling counters from the beginning would have been a great advantage to have. A posting top roll counters a low hand top roll. A low hand top roll counters a hook. A hook counters a posting top roll. Keeping that in mind and knowing how to apply this information makes some matches very easy. Number 39, countering the flop press. As a beginner, I felt pretty anxious when I knew that I was about to face a flop presser, because it is pretty scary to have somebody crashing down on you without caring about his hand at all. But after finding out how to beat this move, I actually started looking forward to pulling these guys. You just have to take their pronation. You can either come forward and do an inside move yourself, aiming to gain as much of a wrist curl as possible, or you can pull outside towards yourself, but with a big focus on just curling your wrist and lat pulling your opponent towards you. This drags them out of their bone line and greatly reduces their strength. But never ever pull into their hands and fingers. Number 40, how to get straps. From the beginning, I always used to prefer to pull in straps. I felt a bit more comfortable there and also a bit stronger. But I used to have some problems getting there because I didn't know how to slip properly. Letting go of the grip with your hand, dumping your riser and pulling towards yourself as hard as you can often works. But sometimes if you make it too obvious or the referee is in a bad mood, you will receive an intentional slip foul. Your opponent can also hold on to your thumb if he is really strong and even just straight up pin you. An often easier way to slip can be to load into your opponent's fingers as if you're going to do a top roll in the setup, and as soon as the go comes, you come forward into a flop press. You don't hold on with your fingers in order to just slip under your opponent's hand. And this way you will always get the strap. I've never seen an intentional slip foul called for that. And if you do it properly and it comes as a surprise for your opponent, it should almost always work. You've made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching and good luck on your own arm wrestling journey.